Today, we are going to go through how to play the Monk in Diablo Immortal, the best skills, gems to look out for, and some leveling tips to get you going. So let's stop monkeying around and get into it. This class guide series is designed to get you familiar with a class in Diablo Immortal, how to play them, how to level them up, and some key things to look out for. So how do you play as a monk? This is a quick combo-focused fighter class. You're very agile in the melee range, especially because of your generic primary attack that you'll use. Fist of Thunder does have a teleport on it, so you can quickly teleport between enemies, constantly keep the pressure on. It's a lot faster than some of the other melee options. They do have low ability cooldowns because of this combo ability potential that you're looking for, as well as a lot of them having multiple charges. So you're going to get off a lot of abilities, spamming them out, zipping around the battlefield, and in most cases grouping things up and then dealing AoE damage to them once you do bring them together. The downside to this class compared to the other melee options is that you do have a lower health pool compared to, say, the Barbarian or the Crusader. So because of that, you have to be a little bit more careful with your general play, but you can also play this as a ranged class as you start unlocking some of the skills. There's a lot of versatility into the Monk, whether you want to play as kind of a support kind of build and buff allies, which we're going to talk about a little bit later in this video as well, or just a straight melee DPS, or if you want to go kind of a ranged route. There's plenty of options with the Monk's diversity in terms of how you want to play it. Let's talk best skills to start off with. We'll start out with a solo kind of DPS build to get you into the game and how you'll mostly be playing when you're out leveling and doing content on your own. Fist of Thunder is your primary attack here, and really because it is a little bit quicker than the other option doesn't have the teleport, so that absolutely helps in getting you into the fight much quicker. For a melee class like this, it does do solid damage, nice attack speed as well. Next is your main 3 combo abilities. We'll start with Cyclone Strike. Now what this does is when you charge it up, it creates a vortex of wind around you, pulls all the enemies together. It does damage them as well, but basically the purpose of this is to bring everyone to you. Now after you've used this, you'll want to use something like Exploding Palm, which initiates a bleeding effect on enemies. It does damage them as well, and when the enemy dies, they will explode, dealing damage to all nearby enemies. So you want to pop that on the enemies, and then after that, you want to follow up with 7-sided Strike. Now this will dash rapidly between nearby enemies, striking 7 times for tons of damage, and then additionally hit the enemies for more damage as well. So this is like your massive burst potential attack, is 7-sided Strike. So the reason that we combo these together is because Cyclone Strike brings everyone to you, Exploding Palm initiates that bleeding effect, but then when you kill that enemy in that 5-second range, they will explode and kill everyone else around you. And then because we're using our big burst damage in 7-sided Strike to deal massive amounts of damage to them, chances are they're going to die, explode, deal more damage, kill anything that didn't die from 7-sided Strike. You're just going to get a nice little damage bubble that'll happen around you. It's a perfect combo to initiate, and you get all of these skills very quickly in the game, so you can just keep this combo going. Your last skill will mostly be a movement skill. Now initially this is going to be Flying Kick, but I highly recommend switching to Mystique Strike after you have unlocked this skill, because it is arguably better while almost doing the same thing. Now you will dash forward and leave a spirit behind you that will return and pull enemies towards you, dealing a certain amount of damage. Now Flying Kick deals damages to enemies as well. It's kind of a movement ability as well, but you kick enemies away from you and you move yourself. So if you're trying to reposition and pull enemies in, having a pull effect like we do with Mystique Strike, it's much better than when you say kicking around and you're just moving enemies away from you when you want to be bringing them in. It's also really helpful for group content as well, because you don't want to be kicking enemies like out of big packs, as in group content a lot of the cases you'll be grouping enemies up into a big tight circle so you can all spam your attacks into them, and if you're kicking around and moving them away, it's not as useful. Speaking of that group content, in some scenarios you can actually play as a bit of a support character. The Monk is one of the better classes to play as a support. Now in Diablo Immortal there's not really like healing, but you can buff your allies as well as reduce the amount of damage they take, give them absorbs, that kind of thing. So if you're in group content or playing with friends and you want to play that kind of role, there's some options here that you can pick up. Now Inner Sanctuary is one. This will place a circle of protection on the ground, which will reduce all damage taken by you and your allies while they're in that circle. And then you've also got Shield of Zen, which will protect yourself and an ally with a shield that creates an absorb. So when you use this, and if you zoom over to an enemy with it, it's also a bit of a movement skill as well, because you can use it to move around the battlefield, but you'll put an absorb on yourself and that ally, so you can keep yourself and them topped up. Absorbs are great because then you can heal after the absorb, so while the absorb's taking damage, you can heal up your health back. It's a great skill to have, and so you can play this as a bit of a support. And if you are going that route, you probably want to just stick with something like Cyclone Strike and 7-sided Strike just as your main damage abilities, and then having these as your support options. There's some great support abilities in the Monk class if you wanted to go that route as your options. Now, attributes. Your main attribute as a Monk is strength, and your secondary would be fortitude. Strength is your primary because this increases your damage and your combat rating both. So any gear that has strength on it, you absolutely want to be looking out for this and putting it on first. And if you find anything that has fortitude, that is your secondary stat. Fortitude increases your armor, which is valuable for a melee class like us, but as a DPS style, you also get armor penetration and combat rating for fortitude. So any gear that has strength and fortitude, these are the two key things that you want to look out for. Don't forget to be upgrading your gear at the blacksmiths as well, as you can easily transfer the ranks to new pieces of gear that you do have. For those shiny little gems that you find throughout the game, in the red category, you want to be looking for tourmaline, which just gives you a straight damage buff. There's nothing more to say here. For blue, armor penetration for sapphires is absolutely more valuable than just the straight armor. But if you're struggling with staying alive in some situations, putting on some armor won't really harm you in those situations. And for your yellow gems, if you find any topazes that just give you all resistance, they're absolutely valuable, but potency is fine in any regard as well. As you are leveling, pretty much any legendary gem that you find that gives you some kind of benefit, you may as well just put it in your gear because you can always replace it later. But in terms of some to look out for, Everlasting Torment is great because every time you critical hit, you deal additional base damage and damage over time to them. So this gives you a great state damage buff. Really, I would highly recommend looking at crafting something like Power and Command because Power and Command alternate stats every 9 seconds. Power increases your primary attack damage by 8% and Command increases your other skill damage by 8%. So every 9 seconds, that effect changes whether it's your primary attack or your skills. And if you can combo that perfectly with how you're playing as whether you're using your primary attacks or whether you're using your big damage combo of the 3 abilities we talked about before, you're just going to get a flat damage increase over time. It's just really valuable to have. Depending on how you are handling the melee combat, if you are able to really kill enemies without dying and taking too much damage, then Berserker's Eye is just a great gem. It increases all your damage dealt by 5%, but it also increases the damage you take by 5%. So it's not great value for a melee class like this, but if you're doing fine in melee range, you can pick up something like this. And there's plenty of defensive legendary gems as well that you can pick up if that's something you're struggling with, is that melee range. But Everlasting Torment, Power and Command, probably the 2 main ones, and then anything else you can find. Celeste's Weakening is also not too bad for this class as well. But while you're leveling, I wouldn't worry too much about the legendary gems, really just anything you find that gives you any kind of benefits. Some leveling tips for this class is at level 10 in the free battle pass, you get a legendary offhand weapon. Now, I would recommend to pick up the Eye of the Storm as it increases the radius of your cyclone strike, so you can pull in more enemies because the wider that range goes, the more enemies that you can pull in towards you. Though if you wanted to try something else, the Reaching Rebuke is also a good option as it turns your Exploding Palm into Crushing Palm, so it becomes like an AoE attack all around you rather than just that window in front of you. A couple of options that you can pick up there. If you're struggling with solo play, one of the buffs that we talked about earlier, or the absorbs that you can put on yourself, is absolutely worth picking up. If you're struggling to stay alive in some of the harder fights as a melee class, you've got those options there to buff yourself. If you wanted to drop something, say like the Mystic Strike or the Flying Kick, just to give yourself a little bit of absorb to keep you going in those fights, absolutely something that you can definitely do. But ultimately with the monk, movement is key. Comboing your abilities is super important to maximize your damage potential. And then as you get deeper into the game, you can start exploring with some of the legendary gems and some of the different combos that you can put into place, because a lot of the legendary effects for the monk really change the way that their abilities operate. Something like Cyclone Strike can be turned into like a tornado, or different effects can be done with your weapons. So that's where the ranged or melee options kind of come in the later stages of the game. But initially you're going to be playing as a melee, fast, agile class with some support options if you want to play like that. Check out my Demon Hunter class guide if you're looking to play a different range class that you can pick up. Thank you for watching this video till the end. Thank you to our members for supporting the channel. My name is NorZZa, and I hope you have a great day.